6 o'clock, I'm calling the meeting to order for this month's Board of Sewer Commissioners, excuse me. We are trying our best to be socially distanced, and one of our commissioners feels that it's all right because we're men, which can cause him a lot of problems, but that's neither here nor there. Welcome to the meeting. We all have masks, but we're more than 6 feet apart, and we can handle the best. It's not a spit in the eye of the medical people, but it's a little bit easier to understand and hear each other while we're trying to get the projects we're doing done. So the first item of our agenda is the approval of the meeting of 7/9.
It's going to be all you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Yes.
I will motion to accept those.
Motion made to accept the minutes of meeting from 7/9 by Mr. Bickle. I will second the motion. Did you see anything in there that you might want to add or to subtract?
Did not look good to me.
Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Voted 2, 1 abstaining. All right, correspondence.
We do have correspondence on the agenda. It said for 75 Foxwood Lane. It's actually for 79 Foxwood Lane. I'll read the letter requesting an abatement. I'm requesting an abatement in the amount of $31.60 for arrears interest in arrears demand. I'm requesting this because the original bill was never received. They had no way of knowing that there was a bill due. I realize that the town of Raynham is not responsible for the post office, but in fairness, neither am I. And while other people can make excuses, such as not receiving a bill, or say the check is in the mail, I wish to point out that in my 13 years as a resident of Raynham, all of my property tax bills, water bills, and sewer bills have always been paid on time, and in fact, always many days in advance of the actual due dates. You can easily verify this. $31.60 may not seem like a large sum, but for me, it's simply a matter of fairness that I respectfully ask you to consider. The bill in the amount of $241.60 was paid by check and dropped off in the tax collector mailbox at Town Hall earlier today, and that was back on Tuesday, I believe, August 11th. So this gentleman is saying that he did not receive his bill. The bills were mailed out, just as a history, the bills were mailed out end of February, first week of March possibly. I know I received mine. I'm actually in the general area as this gentleman here. I have 2 properties in that area. I did receive mine in the mail. Another note to make with the COVID, town building closed to the public on March 16th. These bills were due on March 30th. During the Sewer Commission meeting on April 16th, the Commission voted to follow along with the town's policy to extend the due date on bills until June 30th with no interest or demand penalty as long as the bill was paid by June 30th. This followed along with other town offices, what other town offices were doing. If you didn't make that payment by the June 30th date, interest and demand would be put back on the bill. Speaking with the treasurer collector, he states that Mass General Laws Chapter 60-15, the collector may, in his discretion, waive such interest charges and fees when the total amount is $15 or less. The collector cannot waive penalties or interest on charges over $15. Again, this bill, this overage in demand is for $31.60. This gentleman is asking for an abatement on the interest and demand. This may open a can of worms where people may, see this and say, "Oh, I laid on my bill, I just say I never received it." So I'm just asking for the board to consider that when making their decision on this abatement request.
I have a question. When did he get his bill?
He's saying
That he paid. How the hell did he know he had a, pardon the expression, how did he know he had he must have got a piece of paper in the mail with a $31.
Interest and demand letters went out.
When did they come out?
They went out in the past couple of weeks. So that, he just received that, that's when he realized he apparently did not receive a previous bill.
In the letter, it states that over the past 13 years, he hasn't been late on any bill.
Correct. So for
So a
13
reasonable
years, he's
person-
been paying these bills.
Reasonable person would assume that he knows a bill comes twice a year for 13 years.
Right.
That's something to take into account.
Who did he ask the abatement to? Us?
Yes.
And the treasurer cannot abate it?
The treasurer cannot abate anything over $15 per Mass General Law, Chapter 60-15.
I don't want to open a can of worms either, but
Precedent.
we abate bills if they are incorrect.
Right, incorrect. Maybe the sewer's been shut off, the water's been shut off, so they're rehabbing the house, they haven't been using the sewer.
I use the term bills, and under the assumption the bills were received and they realized they don't owe it, they abate it. This gentleman apparently didn't get a bill in the mail, according to him, and he feels that he wants an abatement. If he went to the treasurer and asked for an abatement, because the bill came through our authorization, tax collector. If he had gone to him and heard that the law doesn't allow the treasurer to abate anything over $15, he might not have sent that letter to us. As Mr. Bickle says, 13 years, he hasn't had a problem, so he must have known he gets a bill twice a year, and where is it? And I think I'd hang my hat on the fact that the treasurer can't abate anything, interest or penalties over $15. We don't either. I'm not trying to be a hard nose, but as you say, very easy for people who, I didn't get my bill.
Correct.
Well, I'm sorry, you didn't get your bill. I didn't get my license renewal either.
That's
And
what-
I couldn't get a car rental because my license had expired, and I'm in Arizona. What am I doing? Who do I blame? Okay?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I'd say we cannot abate an interest and penalty. We have abated bills. That's the difference that I want to distinguish.
Yeah.
A bill that didn't belong on there. You got charges for 2 betterments. We abate an abetment on that property because he got 2 instead of 1, and he's only using 1 type of thing. Or he's got a sewer bill and the sewer's been disconnected because the house hasn't been occupied, type of routine. That's legitimate to abate a bill, but not interest. I don't think we want to get involved in doing interest and penalties.
I certainly believe the letter, and
I
I
do
believe
too.
it's
I mean,
paid,
I-
I believe it
yeah.
was sincerely.
I do too.
But the windfall across the board, even though it's $31.60 for him, and
Right.
the windfall across the board,
Yeah.
Hey,
that could get vast.
4,000 sewer users
Yeah.
at $31 a
No,
piece.
yeah.
What do you want? 12 grand.
Yeah.
So it's not easy.
Yeah, the validity of the claim's not in question.
No,
Yeah,
not
no.
at all.
No, yeah, but
yeah.
we just don't abate interest and penalty.
Right.
That's out of our domain.
Very good.
And you can send them a letter, we understand, and we appreciate his situation, but we don't have the authority to do that.
Do you need to vote on that?
Well, it's been presented as a correspondence, and under normal conditions, what I would do is what's the superintendent's recommendation to this?
Correct.
He asked us what to do, and I would say that, what is your consensus of how the board feels about this?
I'm going along with the board, I feel the same way.
Okay, then you
okay.
can, as far as I'm concerned, if you want an actual vote for,
Yeah.
to protect yourself,
Yes, that sounds good to
Okay.
me.
I would ask for a motion to, let's say, deny the request for an abatement. That is not an abatement. We abate sewer bills, not interest and penalties, as the superintendent has indicated. So I need a motion to have the superintendent answer the correspondence with that type of information, that we do not have the authority to abate interest and penalties,
So moved.
only bills.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bickle,
And seconded?
seconded by Mr. Kelleher. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote unanimously. Okay, superintendent's report.
Okay, should I have that all in front of you as well? Superintendent's report, week ending August 14th, 2020. Phase 7 contracts 1 and 2, Ty and Bond continues to work and finalize record drawings. Also, the next round of betterments will be going out in September for those remaining properties to be bettered. Those remaining areas include Park Place, Gatsby Drive, Courtney Way, and Mill Street, and one property on King Phillip Street, which actually gets its service from Mill Street. I believe we have a total of 150 units being bettered. Paramount Drive Pumping Station. As reported previously, most punch list items have now been completed. The contractor is still awaiting the flex coupling for one of the pumps which is on reorder. The contractor explained that Mercer Rubber, which is the company producing these fittings, during this pandemic had also changed ownership and personnel. Due to this, all previous communication and emails related to this order were lost. Long story short, the contractor tells me that this coupling is now reordered and in production, although no delivery date has been given. Katy Drive easement. Construction progress meeting was held on August 5th. Present was Liz Desjardins from Ty and Bond, JH Landscaping, and myself. The project is still delayed due to material availability. The required tile matting has been ordered, but the factory is still behind on production due to COVID. Back on June 16th, the contractor informed us that there would be a 6 to 8 week lead time for this product, which put us at August 4th. The delivery date has once again been pushed off, now projected to be the end of August, although no firm date has been given on this as well. The contractor has started and completed most of the other field work on this project and is mainly just awaiting the tile matting, which is the product that's back ordered. The contractor continues to move forward with material submittals. Next project meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, August 26th at 10 a.m. Sewer billing. Brenda is now nearly complete, updating the billing register for billing cycle from January 1st to June 30th. Once Brenda has completed the updating, it then gets sent to Zobrio for processing. Bills should be received by our customers sometime early September. So anybody out there, please look for your bill sometime in September. If you don't receive it, please call. Bassett Knoll. The Bassett Knoll Phase 3 infrastructure work is moving forward. The sewer main and manholes are now installed. Manhole vacuum testing and pipeline pressure testing is completed. Mandrel testing will come at a later date. Riverview Meadows. Riverview Meadows will be getting started on their final phase, being Phase 3 in early fall. This project includes 9 buildings, 6 10-unit buildings, 1 6-unit building, and 2 4-unit buildings for a total of 74 units. Streets remaining, Phase 8. Ty and Bond has completed its analysis for those streets remaining and is present tonight to explain that analysis as well as the Taunton River project and the Dean Street, Church Street wet well evaluation. White Street sidewalk. The highway department sidewalk project is progressing near White Street pump station. We will be losing a couple sections of our post and rail fencing and 2 or 3 bushes over there due to the fact that the sidewalk will now be crossing over a portion of that front yard area of the pumping station. And I got a few project pictures there for you showing that White Street project and Katy Drive project. And also the new truck that's out in the parking lot, although that new truck may be going back to the factory, to the dealer, I should say. We haven't, don't really like the way it's handling. The extra weight of the crane, they were supposed to put some heavier springs in the back to support that.
Elbow
So,
spring or something.
so when you drive the truck, they did put an airbag system in it, but it doesn't seem to be sufficient, so I contacted the dealer this week, and they're gonna come Monday and pick the truck up and bring it back and look at it. They may need to add some extra stiffening springs in there, but it doesn't look like they added any spring work to it. It looks like they just put the airbags in it, and it just doesn't seem to be sufficient. So we'll see how we make out with that. But hopefully get that straightened out.
When did we get the truck?
The truck we received first week of July. And then
Is
it
that
went,
the one we went out back? That was a dump truck.
right, that was last year. This truck was the purchase this year. And then we'll be back on a 2-year cycle. The dump truck was something that was thrown in to replace a truck that's not
Yeah,
utilized
okay.
every day, but,
Because when you said the new truck,
yeah.
and I'm looking at this, that's not the new truck.
No, well, that's the new truck, no, that's the utility body, yeah. But the extra weight of that crane seems to be, I don't think they put enough spring in the back, and we'll send them
Okay.
back to see if they can take a look at it.
Any questions of our superintendent?
Good job.
None.
Is September a normal date for the sewer bills?
I believe it is, yes, right around, we're still on schedule, the usual schedule, so.
That's the January, June 30th,
Correct.
which is the revenue for our first half of fiscal '21.
Mm-hmm.
So we're running not quite on fumes.
Not quite. But we don't have the totals yet. We are down on commercial flow, I will tell you that.
That was to be expected.
Yes, we are down on commercial flow. Don't have a total for you yet. Just still working to get all them inputs in there.
Okay, no, I'm more concerned with the operations.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's the money we need to operate
Mhm.
from July 1.
Do we have the ability to set up people on auto pay? Eliminate a lot of this.
That's all handled through the treasurer collector. Matter of fact, they had a call today, a guy wanted to pay with credit card, and I don't believe they accept credit card up there for payments. But
There's a lot of accounts that they won't let you do an auto pay unless you have it through your checking account.
Mhm.
You can't just throw it on a credit card.
The FD is going to some online stuff, and I believe some stuff at town hall is going to online. But
Oh.
auto pay is a little bit different than online,
Yeah.
obviously, but I think we're getting up with the times, so.
yeah, I still don't think that involves credit cards though, right?
Right, maybe
Yeah.
not this time around, but FD can take credit card payments.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's. that might be
we're this
something.
close to implementing it.
Mm.
Yeah, that might be something we might want to look into.
Yeah.
Because especially when you only get a bill twice a year, I can understand
Yeah.
where there's some confusion. I had to pay a late fee
Yeah.
for my own sewer bill, and I sit on the commission. That's embarrassing.
Well,
Yeah.
But
sits
it
in-
happens.
sits in
You
the
just
file.
get busy.
Yeah, it
It's
sits in the
just-
file.
For those
Just busy.
people out there who may be watching, the man himself acknowledged that it was embarrassing, he was late.
I was late myself.
It was,
It happens.
alleviate that
Yeah.
problem earlier that we talked about. you
What
know,
is it?
Automatic would
Oh, yeah.
alleviate.
Right.
Just ends up from one pile on the counter to another pile, and life goes on, and you forget
Yeah.
about it. So I understand it completely, but maybe auto pay will take care of that if we have the
I'll
ability in
ask
the
my
future.
king if
More and more is just
So
moving
now that
towards
he
that stuff,
knows,
you
we
know.
will not abate.
Oh, yes.
that's.
They told me the
And he
same thing.
voted!
They told me the same thing. They're like, yeah, no shot.
No shot.
No shot.
See, we don't care who it
It
is.
did. Nope.
Any new business there, Mr. Superintendent?
No business.
Okay, old business. Ty and Bond's is gonna review some of the projects he's working on for us, and I want to officially thank Dan Holmes, who is the engineer that oversees our operation from Ty and Bond, to take time away from his vacation to show up. I think he knew why it would be a good idea, so. We have 3 items here. What I'd like to do is not start with phase 8. Let's put that down. Let's talk about the Taunton River, Maine project first.
Okay.
Now, we had a report, Dan, and you gave basically 2 alternatives, option A, option B.
Correct.
And Mr. Bickle and I were wondering if there might be a 3rd option that could be done. He was wondering if that was the only 2 ways you could fix it. I've always been wondering, is this a Band-Aid?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is this a bypass? It may need stents, or can we fix it and fix it once?
Okay, I guess what I would say is there's always other options. You could build many different things that would help improve your current situation. We feel like after doing the analysis, we feel as though either of these 2 options would provide a long-term solution for you. We looked at the slope stability. Our geotech engineers took soil samples, classified what materials are existing there, confirmed the strength of the materials, ran it through some of their programming, and verified that it is what you would call a stable slope, existing state. Which would indicate you're not going to get any type of like undermining failure where the slope, if you have like a 1-to-1 slope or a very steep slope, the ability for that slope to fail increases the steeper it gets. Current slopes out there are around a 1.5 to 1. That means 1.5 feet horizontal to 1 foot vertical. So what we looked at were 2 different slope options, matching that basically 1.5 to 1, or a 2 to 1 slope. The downside of 2 to 1, it's a flatter slope, a little bit more stable, but it starts impacting the top of your wall location. So the slope right now, you have maybe 5 to 10 feet past the manhole, and then it drops down. If you did 2 to 1, it would kind of cut into that, and if Rob had to access that with a piece of equipment, you would be right on the edge of the slope. So that was the downside of the 2 to 1. The positive, the reason we looked at that is that was what we call a green solution. It utilizes more like plantings and growth of vegetative material to help strengthen that slope. That's another reason it's a little flatter. We feel it would be more than adequate stability-wise, prevent future erosion and things like that. If you look upstream of this manhole, the current slope is very well vegetated and there's no apparent failures there. If you cut those trees down and lost some of that root system, that would be one reason why the slope would start failing. So I guess to your point, do we feel the 2 solutions are more than a Band-Aid? With the recommended solution of the 1.5 to 1, that would be a large riprap stone, which is what's out there now. So I fully understand where you're coming from. Why would we repair it the same way that was previously repaired? That's not working. And I guess what I would say to that is, we don't have any record plans of how that was actually constructed. If it was just kind of regraded and rocks put on top, it makes a lot of sense why that would continue to fail. What we're proposing is to remove all that, remove back to native material, as you call it, rebuild to your 1.5 to 1 with like a gravel, compact that, and then lay a geofabric, it's called, over that entire slope. In addition, we would basically at the toe of the slope, create a dry area in the river. We would have to use, there's a couple different ways. You could use a porta dam, they're called. You could use steel sheeting, if you ever seen that. You just pound it in, and then you have to de-water that area, so it dries out that lower part of the river. And we would have them dig a trench, we call it toe it in, right? So probably a 6 foot wide trench, 6 foot deep, and you would put your fabric in there, fill that with large boulders and stones, riprap. And this isn't like 6-inch riprap, we're talking like 2-3 foot boulders, good sized stuff. So that would protect that bottom slope. Then you would build your slope up from there. Fill those large voids with smaller ones to help protect it, all while having that geofabric underneath the entire thing. Then when you get to the top, you kind of do a similar, not as large in scale, but toe in that fabric so it kind of is held at the top of the slope and at the bottom. And I guess what I would say to that is we've done that on many different projects. Hurricane Irene, when that came through, there's a lot of road failures because of all the rain that occurred. And that was a primary repair where we would tow everything in and reconstruct it and provide that extra protection. So we don't feel as though it's a Band-Aid. We feel like it is a long-term solution if it's done properly. And that's our recommendation. Other alternatives, I've even talked to Rob, and I think actually we wrote it in the report. You could almost build like a underground, I don't know what you want to call it, like a retaining wall, a foundation wall. But the cost between rebar, concrete, and just constructing all of that would be order of magnitude higher than what we're proposing now. So that's the other thing, you know, option 3, there is options. Those costs continue to go up with those options.
And when you put the fabric down, you just put riprap on top of the fabric?
Yes, with smaller stones to fill
Yeah.
those voids, yes.
Is the fabric impervious?
So there's a couple different types of fabrics. You have woven and non-woven. Best way to explain it, woven is like a silt fence. If you've ever seen that black silt fence,
Yeah.
if you go up and look at that, that's a woven material. You have crosshatch. Provides quite a bit of strength. Use that a lot of times on like underground for road base if you're in a soft area. The other is non-woven. That's a punched fabric. It's more, I don't know, more of a cloth type. It has a little bit of stretch to it. That's the type that we would probably use for this application. You can get permeable and impermeable. And this application would probably do permeable because you have groundwater behind it.
Was that dance party? What was that?
Sorry about that.
Quite all right.
The ding dong.
Do they make plastic ones, bank stabilizations that are kind of like mats that have?
I'm not positive.
Okay, yeah, that's no problem.
Like I've seen, they do have like black plastic. I've seen it for like
Slopes.
improving strength of like a parking area.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
backfill, put gravel, and you can drive right over it.
Yep.
Things like that.
Yep.
I'm sure
Thought they
nowadays.
were-
I'm sure there is something for slopes as well.
2 to 1 would definitely be better than
But
1 and 1.5.
they both meet the factor of safety.
Mhm.
We feel both of them are a stable solution for this area.
Mm.
The 2 to 1, I think, impacts Rob and the access to this.
Oh, that's my next question.
Maybe a little bit too much,
Mhm.
and that's more the 2 to 1 was more the green solution,
Yep.
not the riprap. So by going 1.5 to 1, we can move that top of bank basically to where it is now.
Well, my question is, what type of machinery would you have to get out there? worst case scenario?
We
you
have,
think,
we've had Vector trucks out there,
Okay.
we just went through a project a couple of years back where we were video cameraing, that area, and, so we had, box trucks out there. In that spot, you gotta come in from two different directions
Was
to
it
get there.
because, obviously it was because there was some sort of issue?
No, it was
Yeah,
more of a I&I research, that was when we were doing our I&I inspections.
Okay.
There was actually a liner
Yeah,
put in that area. They put a short liner in to repair a crack in the pipe.
Yeah.
Right in that vicinity. So, that's the type of vehicles that we do get out there. We use that tractor, with the brush hog
yeah.
to cut that area for the most part. So we get out there with the tractors like that, stuff like that.
I'm just trying to think.
Is
overall
one of the
cost.
two options mean the toe of the slope would be further into the river?
Nope, neither.
It
Both
stays the
options,
same,
we're trying to
it
keep the
stays the
river.
same like this, is the one-to-one,
And
and
then-
then it's to this,
Correct.
you're just taking this piece off the top.
Correct. We don't want to change that toe of slope and push it
And the fabric
further
is
into
just,
the river.
it doesn't stop moisture getting into the soil.
Correct, so,
So as the river flows and it's tidal at that point, water would penetrate the riprap
mhm,
and keep the thing moist. It wouldn't just completely dry out.
correct.
Okay.
Which we would actually want. You wouldn't
Yeah.
want to create like a groundwater.
My initial thought was, why didn't we put a cofferdam? Clean it out, fill it with concrete, and leave the dam there. That's a block that holds the bank up. And if you design it right, any flow of the river isn't gonna be obstructed, isn't gonna pick up speed, it's not gonna get behind the wall, it's not gonna cause the damage. And, you know, that's a 50, 100-year solution, okay? It's what we're dealing with. It's the most critical piece of pipe that we have in our system.
Yep.
And if anything happens there, it would really be very busy for an awful lot of people. Because it isn't as easy as tap, tap, and bypass. You know,
Right.
and you're the engineer, so you know
Oh yeah, there would be a lot of
that,
work.
that is, and there'd be an awful lot of repercussions because of its proximity to the river. If there ever was a break,
Hmm.
now we're dumping right into the river. And no, we don't have to fight the state, we get to fight the federal government, water, and everybody else, even though it would be an accident. And somewhere along the line, they'd say, well, you know it was there, and you didn't do it right. And then you'd say, well, we offered option one, option two, and they took option one because they didn't have the money, okay? And it's supposed to work. And I wouldn't want to put something there shortchanging it because it's a little more money to do it.
Hmm.
If I, you know, that I could sleep at night and not be part of a decision that, if it can be fixed, I wanna fix it, you know? I don't wanna give you, take 2 aspirin and come back 6 months from now, type of thing.
Understood.
So, I'm assuming we're not the only ones in this country and or this world that have this problem currently. So, I would assume also that there are other people that don't have enough room to get a pumper truck out there. Just say right now we couldn't get one out there. There's gotta be a way that we would be able to get whatever we needed to get out of that pipe into that pumper truck. Do they just lay more pipe down and pump it out?
Add suction.
Okay, so add suction to it. So worst case scenario, if we went with a 2-to-1 slope, or just, we still could get the results of a pumper truck out there by laying more suction pipe out there. Am I wrong in that statement?
You could,
Probably.
but if you needed to get the Vector truck has a big snout on the front of it. Usually the Vector truck pulls right up to the manhole, and I mean,
Like
could
I
you do it,
see right
could you do
around
it from the
town.
previous manhole? I guess you could, but it's, I mean, right now we have somewhat of an access to it, but as it's failing, it's getting less and less.
Yes.
I'm not sure how much would be in your option one, how much horizontal plane will we have near that manhole? Will it be diminished? Or-
At the 2-to-1 slope,
Yeah,
your top of slope is basically at the edge of the manhole.
yeah, so that would be tough.
Yeah.
That would be tough. You'd
Dan,
want some-
But not-
on a 2-to-1 slope,
Mm-hmm.
here's the top. How far above the water can you come to put in, say, 2 rows of flat interlocking blocks so that the slope doesn't do that, but halfway up it goes straight up, whether it's 2 feet or 3 feet deep, and keep the space on top? I mean, you see these people like, the one I'll use very quickly is the Ford dealership down on 44.
10 Commerce Way has some.
Huge
They
retaining
stack them
walls.
25 feet high and they put the dirt against
More
it.
than that, probably 50 feet high.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
You can build.
could that be something that we could put in? Well, do you have to do a 1 to 2 from the bottom and then come in at a point where you could just level it and stack that and protect that upper area and still get that toe the way you want it?
Yep, yeah, we could absolutely put a retaining wall pretty much anywhere. I guess I would say outside the water. You could probably put it in the water, but that becomes a permitting nightmare. I would.
Yeah, but I mean, I've been over there, and I know you get to the edge, and it, you know, there isn't a big area, and you get to the edge, you look down there isn't much to play with,
No.
Yeah, it's pretty steep as it is.
okay?
1.5 to 1 is not a flat slope. It's
No,
pretty
No,
steep.
I mean,
that is.
I'd feel a little more comfortable if you could get it where we don't lose the space up top. And if it means we have to add, putting in structural stones
Yep.
that weigh 800 pounds apiece type of thing.
You would use those large ready rocks.
And build some space to the riverside of the manhole so you can get around it and still get the security we want to protect the pipe. That might be a third option that would make a little bit more of a comfort as far as I'm concerned.
You want option C.
Beg your pardon?
You want an option C, you say.
Can you move the manhole cover? Probably not.
No.
Okay, well, just,
Yeah, no.
you could at a cost, but just, I get it.
No, big cost, yeah.
I'm just asking.
The next one we're gonna
What's the
talk
cost
about
of
is a
failure?
movable one.
Is a failure, I mean, that's what we
Yeah.
gotta avoid at all costs.
No.
So just get all the options.
We did just not an in-depth evaluation, but we kind of looked at it
Yeah.
in the beginning of this, saying, hey, how could we do this? One of the biggest challenges that would occur is right now the length of the pipe is say 1,000 feet long. Just call it that. If we reroute it, you end up being maybe 2,000 feet. And when you're dealing with a pipe slope, right now you're real close to minimum slope through there. Is that correct? So you're already at minimum. When you extend that,
Yeah.
by the time you get out there, you're underneath the connection point. So that was one of the biggest challenges.
Okay, that's fine, so we gotta
But
work with what we have.
pump station to get around is always an option, but that's a lot too.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think that this is something we have to put on our calendar. We have to protect that pipe. We've been talking about it for a couple of years now, and I know you're on vacation, so you won't give me an answer tomorrow, or even a week from tomorrow. But could you look into that and see if it could be done feasibly, okay? Economically, that would be a decision. If we have to spend more money or whatever it is, that's a decision that we can make, but it's gotta be feasible engineering-wise to be
Yeah.
able to protect that pipe and still not take the flat surface away from the manhole in case we have to service.
Okay.
All right?
Just understanding the area and thinking of.
You're familiar with the area.
slopes. Yes. I would say you can definitely put a retaining wall in there. I think I would probably recommend, if we would probably wanna set it, here's your pipe elevation, the bottom, maybe at or just a little bit below that to protect that area, and then just have the slope come up to that, and you have your wall and then a flat top. But, like we've discussed, that would add significant cost, but
Yeah,
we
because
can,
actually with the wall, we could expand the area to the water side of the manhole that we've lost and just retrieve, even if it was only 2 or 3 feet more,
Mhm.
that was there at one time. But in looking at that, the very first time you took me over there, that runoff was from the surface.
Mhm.
Because the topography brought it right down and as it goes, it takes the ground with it.
Mm.
And the edge has moved back because of a lot of surface. We might have to put a berm there to direct the water. And that was another thing we had talked about at one time, if you recall. Maybe having to berm the runoff from the blacktop away from that point.
Yep.
So you got a option C to look at,
Well, look at that.
yeah.
A question on option A and B, what would you normal circumstance,
Mhm.
what would you consider lifespan of both?
Normal
Normal circumstance, tidal
Honestly,
moon, tide,
with
tidal-
the rock, the riprap, it's a very durable material, right? Like similar, probably even stronger than concrete. You're 75, 100 years. I mean, all rivers move, right, over time.
Mhm.
There's the
Again,
likelihood it's
normal
going to
circumstance,
change.
yep, no, dynamic situation
Yep.
down there.
But there's no reason that wouldn't be a 50 to 75 year solution. I would say both options, honestly. The other one, you gotta get established that grass growth and the
Mhm.
plantings, so that's gonna take some time. And, you know, if it's not growing, you may have to replant some stuff to get that back. But once that's a fully vegetated slope, that you should get a very similar lifespan out of that. That green solution also uses geofabric. It's called like soil encapsulation. So you put the fabric down, you place lifts, like a 1 foot lift of soil, compact that, you take the fabric and wrap it back up and over,
Okay,
and then you put your next piece of fabric, hang that over the whole thing, and then you put your next lift, and then you continually wrap it. So each foot of soil is contained by this fabric, and then you put some type of loam so you can grow stuff on top of the material. So, but yeah, we feel very confident these are long-term solutions.
okay.
Okay,
But there, like you guys said, there's other solutions.
you know, you give any years, that's happy, I'm not gonna have to answer that question
Mhm.
again.
Yeah.
But
75 years is not a bad run.
Yeah, but I still think though that maybe with a little bit of a retaining wall, that you can get some space to be able to work around that area. Not that it has to be elaborate,
Mm-hmm.
but, and at the same time, I think if we build it, I think we need to spec in a berm to move the water away from that section, let it go down the riprap a little, maybe 25 feet in front of it instead of right where it was going. Because it comes down like this, almost adjacent to the manhole. You know, like 4 or 5 feet from where the manhole is, the slope is doing that.
Yeah. Are we talking two different manholes? I almost feel like you're right at that edge of the parking lot. There's a catch basin there.
No, I'm talking about the manhole at the corner of the building.
In the back.
In the back.
Yeah, in the back corner.
Okay, alright. Because there's also
Right, yeah.
runoff from that
Yeah,
parking lot
yeah,
further
in the
up,
back of the
but-
building it comes down and then you get into the grass and stuff like that. But it kind, you know what happens when you get enough water moving without any obstruction, it picks up velocity and it keeps digging and digging and it just deteriorates
Mhm.
that banking. And that's where we're having some other problem.
Mhm.
So then when you think about it, one of these might be the solution, but regardless, we're gonna have to put something to control that water off the blacktop.
Okay.
Okay?
Good job, Dan.
Question C, Church Street, Dean Street, wet well examination, evaluation.
Alright, let me change gears here. Alright. I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. There'll be a lot of references, so I'll try not to go too far here. Alright, so we did a evaluation of Church Street and Dean Street pump stations and their wet well capacities to understand the impacts of what the Phase 7 full build-out sewage flows will have on these two previously built stations under Phase 6. Originally, a lot of that Phase 7 work wasn't going to be built, ended up getting built, so now we need to make sure these wet wells and pump stations are adequate. So we just recently built the Park Place pump station. That collects Park Place, Gatsby, pumps up to Church Street, flows down by gravity to the River Street pump station. That pumps up and over the Church Street Bridge to the Church Street pump station, which then pumps up to Dean Street. And then finally, Dean Street goes up Hill Street to Paramount and eventually to Route 44. So that's the section we're talking about. In the evaluation, we looked at two scenarios, scenario A and B. A is basically just full build out of everything you guys have in the ground now. Scenario B is if we added sewage flow from City of Taunton. So that's right against the Taunton line. There's some neighborhoods down in that area that could conceivably be served by sewer. The best location for them to connect would be through your system. Not saying they've ever come and talked to you guys about it. This was actually back when John McGarry was superintendent, he wanted us to consider that. So those are the two different flows that we evaluated. So to summarize what the result was, if all of that sewage, scenario A and B, were to run through this system, all those different pump stations, you would have several areas that are inadequate, both Church Street and Dean Street. Scenario A, we feel, is a little bit further down the road, if ever, or scenario B, sorry. But scenario A, we want to make sure if everybody connects in the next 5 years, you guys will be covered. Essentially, with just scenario A, everything is adequate. You're starting to bump up against pump starts. There's like rule of thumb, you don't want too many pump starts. It will end up wearing out the pumps. You're getting close to some of that, but with our numbers, you know, they're fairly conservative. You estimate peaking factors and things like that. We feel it would be very close before you have to upgrade anything. If we combine both scenario A and B, Church Street would need a larger wet well. The pumps would be running too often. And the pumps would also need to be upgraded to handle the additional flows. Under that same scenario, Dean Street would also need to be upgraded. Not so much the wet well, I don't believe.
Not the well.
The wet well's fine, but the pump, actually both the pumps and motors would need to be upgraded. So right now you have T4s in there,
Yeah.
and those would need to be upsized to a Gorman Rupp T6. It's just a larger capacity pump. So that would start getting costly. So one other option that we looked at was, right now, River Street pumps over the bridge and goes right to Church Street, wet well, and then gets repumped. You could combine force mains, which we looked at, but when you combine force mains, if both of those start at the same time, the pressures increase and you could run into some problems there. So it might be possible, but for an operations basis and for Rob's point of view, like if Church Street's pumping and River Street can't keep up because it has to overcome that additional pressure, now maybe he's flooding out the wet well down at River Street. You could put in some logic, what they call it, into the control panel. So you say, all right, Church Street, you don't pump if you feel pressure in the line caused from River Street. And again, if with sewers you have your peaks, right? Morning and afternoon when people are home using showers and all that. You may not have that luxury of saying, all right, don't pump for 5 minutes or whatever it may be. So we weren't necessarily recommending combining those. The other option would be to actually just extend River Street's force main. So it basically bypasses Church Street, goes up to Dean, and discharges right to the Dean Street wet well. We know Dean Street wet well is adequate, can handle it. You take all that flow, basically Park Place, River, Brook Drive, and eliminate it from Church Street. So any future development and growth in that Church Street, that pump station would then be perfectly fine. It's fairly expensive to run force main that far, but possible, obviously, right? We just did it. If we do that, Dean Street would still require upgrades eventually at full 100% build out. So
That's under B.
that's under B, correct.
Okay.
So that's adding
Taunton.
a lot more flow.
Yeah.
Correct.
Under A, even if you rerouted River Street, you would not need to do anything to Dean. Just rerouting, because you're just adding the flow in a different spot. Instead of running it through Church Street, just running it up the street.
So if we run a new force main up to Dean Street, the River Street pump station would need small upgrades. New motor, what was it? I think it's just new motor size, because it's now pumping longer and higher.
Yeah.
So the combination, you have what's called head loss as you travel longer. So between that extra length and the extra height, you would need to do some upgrades. Now the one area, so we do high level evaluations for these types of reports. We're not into the nitty gritty detail. The one area we might just have to verify is, right now that's a single phase electricity service coming into that pump station at River Street. We're pretty confident we could put in a VFD and convert that to 3-phase power and still run. So then we'd have 3-phase power at the station. That would run just the pumps. So we'd have to upgrade the motors on those pumps to be 3-phase, because single phase can only go up to I think 10 horsepower, maybe 15, but that's the upset limit. So there may be some upgrades there by converting that phase 3. All the electricity will still run phase 1, like all your lighting and outlets and everything. Your generator would still be single phase. That would be the intent anyways. You don't want to replace it right now. Eventually in the future, maybe you could upgrade it once this one ends its useful life. But trying to maintain that would probably be a key cost saving measure, as long as it's adequate. And all those calcs would still need to be done, but those upgrades are necessary.
Even under A, huh? I thought A we were pretty close to.
Okay, so under A, if we change the discharge location
Okay,
in Dean Street.
But we wouldn't need to. We'd be pretty close to the.
You could leave it under A right now and
At full capacity.
at full capacity.
And we're under, okay.
But then you just keep discharging to Church Street.
Yeah, but we were good, so on the whole, we're getting close to those numbers, but.
Yeah, and it's very close, and honestly, if you read our recommendations, you're probably like, really? These are the recommendations? The recommendations are basically, let's evaluate these connections. Are people connecting at a rate that's, hey, we're gonna be 90% in 2 years? If so, no, that'd be good in that we'd have more flow data. So we could say, let's revisit all these numbers. So we use different guidelines when we size these things. One of the main ones we use is TR16. So they have recommended flows that we should estimate, recommended peaking factors, In this area, it's a very small collection area,
Mhm.
so the peaking factor is extremely high. As the collection areas get larger, those peaking factors come down. It's a graph that you use right out of TR16. So those peaking factors is like 5 times average flow.
Mhm.
After several years of data, you could verify that and say, hey, you know what? Rod has his ways of determining what that max flow is. We're not anywhere near that peaking factor, so maybe we shouldn't be using TR16. Field data indicates it's this, put a little buffer on that. And once you see that, maybe all of a sudden you don't need to upgrade a pump to meet that, what we assume to be a higher peaking factor because we use TR16. So we were basically saying there's some low-level improvements that you could possibly do, change elevations in the wet well, so that would give you a little bit more storage and change your operating times. There's one other one.
RPMs on the pumps.
The RPMs, we could up those RPMs and get more flow out of the pumps.
Okay.
But that, that's a motor change out, several $1,000s to get those new motors installed.
I'm assuming the motors and the pumps become more efficient as time goes on, as technology advances, and or no?
Yeah, I don't think we've seen much of a change in that, have we?
Okay.
VFDs, I mean, if you had VFDs, that sometimes helps because you can control the speed of the motor.
Mhm.
Although with the type of pumps we have, where they're self-primer, it's not recommended to do that because they can start ragging up on you. So the type of pumps we have, you want to maintain the speed that they're designed for.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah, and with these suction lifts, their efficiencies have been pretty much the same for the last 50 plus years.
Okay. Gotcha.
But there's other pumps that are highly efficient, but they have other challenges.
They give us a couple of options. The running the force main from River Street directly to Dean Street. I had just the fact that you were talking that which was the line item, which was the most expensive item. What I considered when we thought of that is that we're now digging a road that within the past 2 years we had just finished the roads. And do I want to go curb to curb? Force main's about 4 feet.
5, yeah.
4 or 5 feet.
Yep.
So it's not a complicated thing. It's just below the point where you have to have a box. Okay? But it's not a dangerous thing like being 12 feet down or 14 feet down in the sewer. And it just runs. It's just one continuous pipe from one spot to another spot. But we have to disrupt all of that road to get it to there. And it's expensive, as you said. The other option was to increase the size of the wet well at Church Street. And then you had the option A, just picking up Parks Place in Gadsby when it's in full head coming into the well. And then on B you said, well, there's a whole section over there in North Precinct Street that's in Taunton. Taunton has 2 areas that are adjacent to Raynham that they have sewer problems with. That's one, and there's one right up by where the superintendent lives. It's a mobile home park, like 300 houses?
400, I thought they were saying. Yeah.
Okay, 400 houses. They've wet the whistle about that. They know they can put sewer out there, but it's cheaper for them if we let them hook up to us.
Correct.
Okay? Now, the very first thought when they said that at a meeting with Rob and I said, well, we'll make money on this. I said, the first thing is, I don't care if it's 5 gallons or 250,000 gallons. That's not part of our quota. That's extra. We collect the handle. We'll pay them for the use the same as if there was in Raynham. And Taunton pays for all upgrades that we have to have in order to get it from point A through our system to them, which would mean, and we're out at the little finger of the line that has a small wet well
Yeah.
and low pressure because there's not much there. Now we're throwing these in there. So all the way down that line to the master pump, they would have to be responsible for. And that's a negotiation,
Right.
not with the engineer, but with the commissioners and them.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing happens in Precinct Street. You're coming in the left arm to the main pump. And if we were to set it for Precinct Street, if we were to decide to anticipate that, we would have to spend quite a bit of money now, because we need to spend some money now to take Park Place and Gatsby. Because as you had in the report, that whole study that was done was changed, and it was said it was going to be dropped from future
Correct.
consideration.
Yeah.
So, and that was a result of one of the discussions I had with you and Tony, that if you were designing it, why the hell didn't you think about this at time? And kind of like egg on the face, you go back and you see, well, you did what you were told to do, and that's where we are. So we need to think about it. So I think that we're going to have to spend money, but we're going to have to spend money a little more efficiently. I would think, of course, if you did everything you had on that list, that's $1 million. Now you don't do all of it.
Correct.
You do, if you do the force main, you do affect Dean Street.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dean Street gets affected either way.
No matter what, correct.
Okay, so, and we wouldn't have to worry about
Church Street.
the one thing that the fly in the ointment here is, when we put these ideas together, you were thinking 50, 55 and older homes that are being replaced by 145 condo units.
I believe that's
Okay.
still up in the air though.
Alright, so,
I think that's still up in the air. That might go back up.
Well,
Yeah.
regardless of whether it's
Right.
going up or down,
Right.
that's the only thing that's the difference in whether or not we just put the wet well in. Because if we just do the wet well, we know we can take care of 55. And if it meant that we had to change some pumps or some motors because of the extra volume to get it out sooner, that could happen. But we don't have to worry about 150 units down in Taunton. That's a longer run than just coming down Church Street. Okay? But in either case, I think what our problem is the Church Street station at Wetwell is undersized. And that requires not only that, maybe some changing in the pumps and the motors, you know.
Down
You
the
can say,
road.
well, you can put it off, but when you think about it, preventive maintenance is cheap compared to crisis management and fixing. So whatever we decide to do, I think it would be, and a lot's going to be based on your recommendation and your guidelines to that. If we say, let's do the wet well, do we spend another 60 or 70 or $80,000 to upgrade a pump and a motor or some electronic control down at Dean Street now in anticipation? We don't want to force it to the maximum if we can tweak it up and it's running 85% of its maximum and it's doing a great job, and not be at 98.5% and it's groaning type of thing.
Yep.
All right? That was what came out of the whole thing as I saw it, and was the wet well has to be replaced. And all the other stuff that's in there are potential expenses. I saw 3 items that were combined River Street, force main with Church Street, force main. That was relatively inexpensive, but that meant you had to go up to Dean Street and do an awful lot of work, and you had to do electronic tweaking so that Church Street and River Street are talking to themselves, and they say, "Don't pour the coffee, I'm spilling the tea."
That's right.
Okay, and that's a nightmare if there's ever any dust on the board and it backs up somehow and neither one of them work, type of thing. So.
Right.
So one thing on that wet well replacement at South Street, at Church Street, I'm sorry. In your notes, it says pumps and motors may need to be relocated. That is gonna be on page 11.
We're not doing a pump station, we're just doing a pump, a wet well.
Wet well, but it says here that they may need to be relocated, I'm assuming because of that wet well change, and if so, how are they gonna, I'm assuming because of the suction lines would have to be relocated? And if so, how are they gonna do that, because they go into the building?
Where would the wet well go?
4.5, sorry.
What is it?
Where does it say this?
This is
Page 11,
page 11,
4.5,
right in
4.6.
the, just above 4.5, yeah, so that paragraph above, 4.5. Last sentence, pumps and motors may need to be relocated.
Under the 4.2
Right.
grouping.
So last sentence after the
Yeah.
comma.
Yeah, this is talking about the wet well replacement. I think the intent of that statement is if you pull out that old wet well and now you're putting a larger one, so right now it's fairly close to the building.
Yes.
You gotta be able to dig out right in front of that building. I think it's only 6 or 7
Yeah, it's
feet.
not far.
So when you're building these, you can put in the wet well, then the building. Now that the wet well is in, it's significantly deeper. To dig that up, you need to shore right next to the building so it doesn't undermine.
Mm.
So I think the comment there really means you may have to move that wet well further away from the building so you don't disturb it. While doing that, that extends your suction lines, depending on how much flow we're trying to pump through and what the layout of those suction lines look like. There could be too much suction head in that, and you would have net positive suction head problems where you're cavitating
Yeah, so
and
you
just
need
not
bigger lines.
pumping,
Yeah.
so you may need bigger lines. Or if like the suction lines were moved inside the wet well, that would reduce that length. I think, again, this gets back to, you have to do a detailed design to
Yeah.
understand exactly what we're trying to do before you can make that statement, but moving those suction lines or the pump skid further or closer to the wet well would help reduce that
Yeah.
length.
I got you, yeah,
Likely unfeasible, that's a lot of work,
Yeah.
as you know. But that's why we're referencing the NPSH there.
yep. It just seems like.
Which would increase costs.
Right. It just seems like, I know it's like one of the cheaper versions, ways of doing it. I just think the difficulty factor of replacing that well would be enormous.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
a hassle.
Not to say they can't be
You
done.
know, all the floats are in there.
Yeah.
You gotta take all those out.
All the tubes.
Bubbler tubes,
Suction
your
lines.
suction lines are all bolted connections, you gotta disassemble all those and put it back together without any leaks,
Mm.
right, on the suction side. There's a lot that goes into just replacing that wet well. We didn't put it in this report, I think we talked about it offline.
Yeah.
Listen, what you're doing is doing the park replacement all over again.
The which one?
The one we just finished at the industrial park.
Yes,
Hmm.
with the wet well?
Well, we had to build a whole new shack to do the whole damn thing because you had to take the stuff from out of the ground up out of the ground.
Oh, Paramount.
The park, yeah,
Yeah,
Paramount.
Yes, yes. Which
It's
was
it's basically
very
the same,
complex.
basically the same thing. Except all of our stuff is up above grade right now on Church Street.
Correct.
It wasn't at Paramount. They were down, okay?
Lower.
So, logistically, you gotta dig a hole right next to the existing wet well or closer to the street. It'd be better if you could get it closer to the building, then your lines would be shorter that you had to attach to. And even if you got instead of a straight, you had to do a 45 to go in, it would still work. So, but there's some
But to dig-
complications to it.
Right, you're digging, I don't know exactly, but 20-ish feet, where you have your building foundation at 5 feet. So you, yeah, the footing is about 5 feet.
Yeah.
So as you dig and you're that close to that building, you have your own set of complications. And
Well-
it sounds easy just to sheet it, but then
Yeah.
you have your suction lines right there and your drain line.
Well,
that you're-
it'd be difficult to sheathe anything immediately around the wet well because you don't know where the line is. You can look and say, here's the line, but you got all this other plumbing that you're contending with.
Correct.
Force
Okay.
main's gonna be in that area.
Force main, yeah.
But that is an engineer's nightmare
Yeah.
to design it so it can be handled properly. It's not the commission's nightmare.
That's true.
It's your nightmare. You get paid the big bucks to solve those problems.
Yep.
When the superintendent has a
We
question.
can do it.
Yes, so,
We may not be able to fund it,
Well,
but
Yeah.
you can do it.
that's right.
well, see, that's part of, when you get a report. I hate to keep saying it, but a bean counter looks at a report completely different than an engineer or anybody else. I look at numbers.
You don't even read the text, do you?
And I say, whoa, wait a minute here. Well, I start with the numbers, then I go back and see if the text justifies the
Supports the
number.
numbers?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, it's a different thing. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. Is it needed? Yeah, well, we gotta do what we have to do. But, the wet well, I believe, is a necessity, and I think we realized that when we actually went with 7 and went over to Park Place and knew that we had this problem and we have to solve it. And we have the capability and I think we have the resources financially to be able to take care of this without any real difficulty. It's just the sundry things that go with it, you know. If that's the price to replace the wet well and sleep at night without any problems, it's doable. But if that's just a guess and a contingency would be 50% more, then you know how it is, Dan, you know.
Mhm.
We can't commit to do something unless we know we have the funds, that's the type of thing.
On the extended River Street force main, that 310,000, does that include the upgrades to the pump station, or is that just the force main extension itself?
I think it's just a force main, to be honest, the way I read it.
That is page 4.
Page drop.
Page 11 explains it, and page 14 shows the cost.
Extend force main to D14, 310.
Yes.
So, actually, the very last page of the report in the appendices
You have a unit cost,
is the
a
breakdown.
project cost, and that doesn't include anything, the construction.
New motors, Street RFD, correct, this is extending the force main and upgrading River Street so that it can now pump up to Dean Street. And then eventually Dean Street would still need to be improved.
Those two motors that you have listed there is Dean Street?
Nope, River Street. So that it can now pump up to the higher elevation.
Okay, Church Street.
So that includes the motors, that includes the electrical mods, doesn't include a generator if we needed to do a generator.
Correct.
You're thinking we don't need to because we put VFDs in, which would convert it to run the motors. That's all we really need to run in there is the motors and motor starters, I guess.
Right, and that would be being pumped out of the generator at single phase.
Right,
And
the
still have
generator.
to run through VFD, so
Yeah.
you'd still have lights, so you
Right.
could access it, but,
Yeah.
correct. And now, again, we need to do full detail and check numbers, but that may only allow one of the pumps to run.
Okay.
Typically, when we design the generator, we size them so that it can run both pumps in case of some unforeseen emergency.
you want both
But
pumps.
generally, just one pump's running to operate the station.
Now the patch, temporary patch and then permanent patch, is that permanent patch or is that permanent overlay?
Is,
So, on typical large-scale projects, we end up overlaying the entire road
Right.
based on past agreements with highway. This, because it's only a 5-foot deep force main, you would expect maybe a 5-foot wide trench patch. We were only accounting for repaving that trench, not overlaying an entire road for one patch.
now, on those back two pages, one that's 310 that says extend force main to D14,
Yep.
and then you got Church Street and Dean Street pump station evaluation combined with the Church Street force main
Yep,
is another 130.
correct.
So if we put the force main in, we're gonna have to spend 440.
No.
Nope. This one, this 130,000, is the upgrades that would be required at River Street on the pumps and motors. But then the force main would actually just combine with the force main of Church Street's force main. So we would only have to do, how many feet? I think we said 100 feet maybe. 4-inch, sorry, 6-inch, 150 feet of 6-inch force main to connect those.
So these two sheets would not be added together?
No.
Correct.
Church Street and Dean Street pump station are to combine the Church Street force
That
main.
would be if they
So-
took the river.
That's coming off of River Street
Yeah.
and tying it directly to the force main
On
instead of the
Fly
wet
Church.
well
Yeah.
Correct.
in front.
Yes.
Okay, that's the short run.
It would bypass that wet well.
Yeah.
Okay,
Now
And then
you're combining-
recombine it.
yeah, okay. So that's the cost of the bypass.
Yes.
Okay. The other one, of course, is the force main.
Yep.
Replace Dean Street pumps, 275,000.
On the scenario A, you're saying we don't have to do that though, right? Dan, replace Dean Street pumps?
Let me just double check here. Dean Street pump curve. You would need motor upgrades.
Motor upgrades.
So you would want to run from, currently I think it's around 1750 RPM. You would bump up to 1850 RPM, and by doing that, I think you have a 20 horse there now, or
Yes.
25. Either way, I think it's bumping from either 20 to 25 or 25 to 30.
Yeah.
And that essentially maxes out the pump curve, the operating range. So if you look at figure 4, hard to see.
What page?
It's in appendix C. There, I won't come up there.
You're driving us, you're driving me personally crazy
Crazy.
with your technology. It would be relative, no, that's not figure 4, is it?
Figure 4.
Figure 4, Dean Street pump curve,
Yeah,
yeah.
alright.
I think it would be easier, at least from my understanding, if you were to take the time to spend with him on the phone. You don't have to sit there and hold his hand. And discuss, okay, we're gonna do the wet well. We're gonna replace the wet well on Church Street. What do we have to do in regards to the pumps on Church Street, which will be affected by the bigger wet well, and or Dean Street, in anticipation of the load coming from Park Place in Gadsby, which is in our system, but they haven't hooked up. Don't worry about North Precinct. I don't think we have to worry about Taunton up there. We don't have to save a problem for the city of Taunton on that aspect.
So for Dean Street, just scenario A, we would need to upgrade the pumps and motors.
Okay,
The motors, sorry,
okay.
combining the two.
So that's part of a cost package. Now, we know the wet well, you got it figured in as $230,000. How much more is it gonna cost to put the pumps in if we have to upgrade something at Church Street and something at Dean Street to make it run comfortably? That's a number that's lost in here someplace.
I mean, at this
Okay.
time, really, you wouldn't need to do any motor work. The flow isn't substantial there yet. So if you
Yeah,
increase the wet well
Church.
down at Church, right,
Correct.
and Dean, actually, both of
Yeah,
them.
yeah, correct.
So if we replace the wet well, that kinda gets us out of the woods on capacity. When the flow starts to increase, so let's say we get all of Park Place and all of Gatsby tied in,
Mhm.
which is more or less what we're looking at for scenario A, and the other areas that tie into Church
Correct.
Street. That's when we would have to worry about increasing pump sizes, or motor sizes.
Yes. Once that full build out
Right.
starts flowing to it.
Hmm.
But I don't know if you know off the top of your head how many starts you're having there now. I mean, you're only,
We're doing
Have-
1.5 starts an hour at Church, and 1 start per hour at Dean.
It's nowhere near it, right?
no, not
It's
even
nowhere
close.
near it.
Not even
What,
close.
5 or 6 you said, or optimum?
6.
Optimum?
Right.
Park-
6 is your high side, but there's
Right.
places that do 7, 8. I mean,
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah.
Park Place in Gadsby hasn't gotten their notification of their betterment.
That's coming soon.
Next month.
Yeah. And they come in groups of a building, maybe 10 apartments in the building?
I
8?
wanna say they're 12 to, do you know how many over there, Jeff?
Pardon me?
Park Place, 12 units to a building?
They vary.
Yeah,
Yeah, some are bigger than others.
yeah.
Not exactly. I
Even
mean,
if you,
make one
if
phone
he
call and get
picks
you that
up,
info, but I don't have it right
Yeah,
here.
I think
you pick
so.
up 3 buildings,
Yeah.
you got 30 to 36. Okay, and I'm not worried about the volume.
There's 12 units, there's 8 buildings, times 12, we get 96 that'll be embedded over there, so.
Yeah, see, so, the volume, if the field doesn't die, the association won't vote to hook it up,
Do the work.
okay? They're gonna get a betterment, they're gonna wonder why. It's surprised the hell out of me, that almost each building is independent.
Mm.
They have basically an association, but each building is basically, the manager has to get approval from each building to do stuff,
Okay.
all right? So if this building says, listen, I'm sick and tired of, get the pump down here and it's sluggish and stuff, I wanna hook it up to sewer because I wanna sell, and the fact that sewer's out there improves my value on my property. We haven't hooked up yet, but he'll get a ruckus, he'll get 7 people and they'll say hook up.
Right.
So it could happen spasmodic.
Yep.
It's not like we're just opening it up to a subdivision off of Locust Street and the guy builds 47 houses and he hooks them all up and sells them, type of thing.
Right.
Right, so between the two of you, so that we can kind of take this one off the table, come up with the idea. I think, based on this, I think the wet well is I think it needs to be done. And it has the capacity of even what is going on up the street.
Right.
Okay, on Church Street. So let's go with that and come up with some type of a, I know you got a contingency in there, but really think about what it's gonna cost us if we have to get out there and do that. Do a little study. You got paid to do this study and you're gonna be part and parcel of the project, so, you know, it's just something to make it easy for us to say yes, and you don't have to keep getting phone calls and stuff, say, what the hell did you do here, type of routine.
Okay.
And really take a look at, would it make sense to do something with the pumps and the motors when we do this now, even though we might not have to do it for 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay? At least put it up on a wall someplace for whoever follows you, that they know this is gonna be coming, and they can prepare for that, and not be blindsided with, the hell are we doing here? What's wrong with this? They don't call you up and say, hey, why didn't you figure this out way back when, you know, type of routine. Because you may end up with somebody worse than me. So,
The last 2 pages, item 9, you don't have to answer this question now, but maybe when we come back, those 2 prices should be the same between the 2 pages. Per linear foot, the 6-inch PVC DR18 C900 pipe and fittings.
Yep.
We have 150 linear feet at $80, and then the next page we have 1,200 linear feet at $60.
Yeah. So we did that for economy of scale. If you're running which this is quite a bit longer, if you just call somebody up and say, hey, give me 150 feet to get your equipment there and do that work, there's a cost associated with that. So we carry a higher price for a small quantity. If you're going out to do 12,000 feet,
Yeah, I get
what is
that.
it?
No, yeah, 1,200 square,
1,200.
1,200 linear feet, I get it.
That's a lot more days of work, and you would tend to see a better price on that.
Okay. I thought that was just the material, I didn't understand that was install as well.
That was a reasoning.
it's the way utilities put bids together, Joe.
Well,
Well, how can we get the most money we can get in the fastest motion? So what do we do first? That's expensive to do that, everything else is cheap.
well put, Dan.
Yeah.
We have seen time and time again with a small project, like, oh, this should only cost this much.
Yeah.
And you get a bid, you're like, how is that so much? And it's
Gotcha.
always, we have to get bonds for this, we have to get insurance, we have to mobilize everything, and it's always significantly higher.
Gotcha.
So,
Well,
that was the
thank you.
reasoning for it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do to work it out, so maybe next time we get together or soon before the end of the year, we could make a final decision, so, and then you could get into the design phase and do the studies to see if the pipe is 12 feet deep or 37 feet deep, and we find out that you put the wet well on town property, that it's not part of the sewer department, and we gotta relocate it to the middle of the blacktop, because that's the only place that the building won't fall down on, something like that, so
Yeah.
it's covered.
Got it.
Think we can handle that, Rob?
We can get that done.
All right, thank you. Phase 8 study.
Okay.
Now, I will open a comment that people have asked in the past, and people asked Commissioner Kelleher, when am I gonna get sewer? And that initiation was where we decided to take a look at what the balance of it was. And for the record, my comment made before and made again is that it was economically unfeasible because of what it would take to do. So now you can tell us what you found.
Okay. I would say for a municipality of this size to have as much sewer in the ground as you guys do already is quite the accomplishment. So what we did was we looked at the 15 remaining streets that do not have sewer. One of them was private. Of these 15, we could essentially summarize it as like 9 collection areas. Some of these streets are adjacent to each other, so we didn't want to look at that completely separate. So we have 9 collection areas. What we did was come up with a couple figures to estimate how we could provide sewers to these areas. We use state mapping that shows both like permitting type map areas, wetlands, rare species, wellhead protection, things like that. We use that along with their contours, state map contours. So those are all shown in the figures, and then we came up with OPPCs, opinions of probable project costs. So we wrap in all costs, including engineering, police, administrative. We try to capture the entire project. So to sewer these remaining areas, it's a combination of gravity, low pressure, or combination gravity with pump stations. I guess I would state anytime you add a pump station to a collection area, as you guys know, the cost increases significantly if it's a small area. And unfortunately, all these remaining areas are quite small. So I guess a couple of the details of some of these streets. For instance, Pine Street borders, what's that, Bridgewater?
Yes.
Sorry. Borders Bridgewater. So if you ran a sewer down that road, you would only be collecting half of what you could be if everything was in Raynham. Myrtle Bank is a very small dead-end road. The first couple houses are served off of North Maine. To get to those back services, you have to put in quite a bit of sewer. And by doing so, it costs a lot more money for 2 people to share that cost.
Can I just interject right here real quick?
Yep.
Just so everybody knows, the streets in question are Alvin Circle, Carroll Drive, Cobb Street, Cody Lane, Finch Road, Gardner Street, Myrtle Bank Avenue, Pine Street North, Pine Street South, Pleasant Street, Prospect Hill, Ridge Road, Shirley Road, Teresa Road, and Young's Lane, which is a private way. Just wanted everybody at home to know
That's
what
good,
we're talking about.
that's good. And I have a question regarding, since you mentioned that, Joe, Prospect Hill, what numbers does that include? Because that gets dissected quite a few times by a couple of intersecting 495.
So it's from O'Brien Ave, roughly up to that subdivision up there on the left, Cody Lane, Teresa, that area there.
Okay, how about north of 495 or anything like that?
All that's done.
No, that's done, okay,
Yes.
very, I wasn't aware of that, very good. So it's just that final piece from, just a little bit south of Carver, like you said,
Right.
O'Brien, all the way.
O'Brien, yep.
Yep, and only half of that is Raynham as well.
Correct.
Yep. One side of the street is Raynham.
Mhm. And actually,
Some of that
On
is Taunton,
Prospect Hill-
some of that is Taunton as
yeah,
well on the
and
same
that-
side.
in the, yes,
Yeah.
but actually, from O'Brien Ave to that Teresa and Cody,
Yeah,
what is it, 3 houses?
Yeah.
Actually, one of them, 2 of them on past O'Brien, the first 2 houses are already serviced. So you're actually only gonna pick up 2 houses until you get to Cody on the Raynham side.
and how many houses are down there?
In,
Those are huge lots.
yeah,
There's
big
prob-
lots,
there's
5 acre
probably-
lots in there.
There's
Yeah,
probably
not
8
many.
houses
Yeah, not
tops.
many in there, yeah.
It would serve a total of 19 units on that entire collection area. Which would require 1,700 linear feet of sewer, 2,650 linear feet of force main, because this would require a pump station. So, all of these areas, the cost, we also looked at some of the permitting. I think 5 of the 9 collection areas require your standard local wetlands permitting. There was one area, I believe it was Shirley Road, that was in a habitat of rare species. So we would have to contact the state and figure out what species that is, and that would be additional work to identify that stuff. Trying to get to the summary here. So
Page 10. Section 4 conclusion.
So we broke out the cost per collection area, and then total the cost. We did make an error on the total. The revised numbers are 13.713 million and 142 total units.
You added 69 twice.
Yeah. So, and that's because collection area 8, which is Finch
Finch.
Road,
Area
yeah, area,
has 69 units.
69 units, and there's, the topography is close. You could do it a couple different ways, we think. One is a lot of low pressure and some gravity, but still needing a pump station. And then another is all gravity, needing 2 pump stations. And just working with Rob over the years, gravity's, and pretty much any municipality, gravity is preferred over low pressure because grinder pumps are a hassle for homeowners and operators.
So if you take those notes on the bottom, the average cost per home would be $96,570 instead of the $86,270. If we change those numbers to 13,713 and 142.
Wait, if you want to go to the betterment, that's a little, you could probably divide it by 4 and you'd get the betterment.
I was just,
Yeah,
because
no,
Dan
you're
gave
right.
us updated info.
You're right. I mean, what it comes out to is 142 units. The cost on this summarization is $15,273,000. That includes 5 pump stations in that grouping. And if you take 25% of the cost, the average betterment, $26,890. If you were to look at them individually as a line item, collection area 7 would be $108,000 betterment. There's only one house that's gonna be bettered for that amount of money. Okay? Section 9, you had 10 units, and it would be $40,000. the only way you can do anything is have multiples in big numbers with low costs. So,
Just a point of clarification on collection area 7. There's a large piece of undeveloped land there. In this report, we didn't assume, oh, you could put in a 30 lot subdivision and account for that. So that may change it, but if only one person owns it, that's still the total betterment after you cut up the frontage lots.
the only way you could do anything on that, and I didn't look at the specifics on it, but let's say you've got 1,500 linear feet on the road. That's 10 house lots. That's the most you could figure. If he were to go for a subdivision and had 9 house lots on the road, stubbed in, and could probably pick up 20 or 30 house lots. You don't know. You can't assume
Right.
what it is, because there's no way you could plot that fairly and better that particular thing. Not that it wouldn't be, it definitely wouldn't be at 108, but I mean, here's a person who's going to pay, if you made it 50 houses instead of 1. Now, what do you got, you know? Yeah, you may be talking $20,000 per house lot. And if the guy doesn't build them, he's paid $20,000 for a piece of land that he's not using, type of thing. And I know that there's the blank spaces in there, you know, let's
Right.
face it, if you come in and there's a big piece in the back and it doesn't have frontage, what good is the piece of land? You buy the house in front of it.
Right.
And you develop it, and you get your money back that way, so. It is it would be a very, very difficult project to sell.
Yep.
Because of the small number of units that would be handled. There is a possibility, I could say, if everybody was interested in a 5-figure, which would be a lot of them, you could do some of them for $30,000 instead of 26. Some of them you could do for 16.
When you say you can do, they should clarify, that's the betterment of the homeowner.
Yes,
Yeah, just so everybody's clear.
yes.
Not
The
total,
the
not
betterment,
Not total project cost.
the project cost for that would be somewhere around $4.5 million. And it has 2 pump stations in it. And the pump stations are expensive, let's put it that way. So that, I thank you for this, and we'll pay the bill that you're gonna send in for doing the service, and we're gonna
Thank you.
table
I
any
think you already
action
said
on that. Well, I think I'd rather table any action on that to any future time. If somebody wants to come in and talk a particular, we could say, well, this is, if we just did your area, this is what it would mathematically, as an estimate, what it could come to. And they might say, well, I'll live with what I got, type of routine.
Yeah, it certainly helps answer the question. I mean, they may not like the answers, but we do field these questions, and it's certainly
Yeah.
gonna help us answer the questions.
We've done our due diligence.
Pretty
Yeah,
simple.
I mean-
It's unfortunate, but definitely
Not
gonna
much you
answer
can
some
do.
questions.
This was a little more expensive than I thought it might be because of 5 pump stations, okay? It didn't make me sit back and say, what the hell is he doing now? Because I knew what it would have cost for Riverbrook Street and River Street if it was done independently of the South Raynham expansion.
Correct.
That was big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
These are bigger.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what happens when you get down to the end of a project. It is, and it wouldn't be, it really wouldn't be that inexpensive if we didn't have pump stations. Because you're only getting 142 units.
This,
And if in 142 units, it's still about an 11 or 12 million dollar project. And 12 million is divided by 4 is 3 million, divided by say 150 is $20,000 a piece. So, you know, numbers really move real fast like that.
and it's interesting to note that as the years go on, this number's not going down.
Oh,
Never has.
Never has, never will.
No.
So that as a baseline now at 26,890 is just gonna keep going
now,
north.
I will say, in all fairness to his pencil work, and in doing it the way he did, which is the way I asked, give me detail on each one of them. There's a couple of line items in there that wouldn't repeat. Mobilization. Right?
Correct.
We're not having 9 different contractors mobilizing to do the job. That would be a saving, not a complete savings, but there'd be a savings there. And because of that savings, the contingency would also be a savings also. Because as you work it down and you come, here's your construction contingency, 20%. Well, your 20% of 400,000, or 20% of 110,000. So you pick up money on one line and on the bottom line. So. Very inclusive. Didn't have any trouble going through it. As I said, I started on page 10 and worked backwards.
That's because Liz wrote it.
Oh,
It was a good exercise for you.
oh, it's good for us to have. That's
Do
what
you
gave-
know of any community in the state of Massachusetts that is fully 100% sewered?
I'm not aware of any. Yeah.
I mean, I would think
I
there would be parts of Boston
I was
that
gonna say,
might
a city
be.
said in Cambridge or someplace, somewhere along
I
those
was
lines. I
thinking
would
maybe one of those
Yeah.
cities just has it everywhere.
Right.
But at the same time, the odds of just a couple streets here and there having septic that's off the beaten path.
Well, somebody just held out. Somebody
Right.
Generational thing and they held out.
I mean, or there's other environmental factors in these towns that you
Oh,
can't do it.
you get into town and
You just can't do it, so
you can't reach there from here.
I like what you said, that we're in pretty good shape. That makes us feel good.
Yeah, you guys have a very robust collection system.
And as hindsight, and I'll let this go after this, in hindsight, the old adage, in hindsight, vision is 20/20. Perfect eyesight. 30 years ago, in 1990, when you really, actually it's been 30 years, because it was 87 when you ran the main line out of Pleasantfield through my backyard.
Okay.
Okay, that was the first part of the big sewer expansion, Pleasantfield and Pleasantfield 2 type of thing.
Extending from 44 that way.
Yeah, commercial was hit first,
Yeah.
then we came in. If they had set a program, they meaning the town fathers and the sewer commissioners, if they had set a program under the guidance of Ty and Bond in their unique estimating capabilities, they could have said, if we're gonna build this in 10 years, and we're going to be able to service 5,700 houses. Here's the master plan. We'll do it in contracts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They could basically estimate what the whole sewer was going to cost and be very close. 25% betterment, 5,000 houses. Here's your betterment. The first house that hooks up, as an example, $4,000 betterment. The last house that hooks up has a $4,000 betterment. It could have been done, because anything that can be mathematically calculated, you can do it. And what would happen would be that instead of a $1,200 betterment on the first go through with 500 or 700 houses, they pay $5. And you wouldn't need the full $5 to pay your debt. That would be accumulating to help pay as you go on. Because now you're picking up more debt and more debt and more debt. It's like not like a reverse mortgage, it's like a reverse bond situation. The very last bond that you get brings it up to 60 million. And what's your debt service? It's not 60 million because you've been paying it along the way, but you predicate the cost and the betterment on a $60 million project. That's how you put up an apartment house. You build the apartment house, you occupy one floor at a time. They're paying the same rent because every unit has got a price for it, except a penthouse. When you finish, you want the penthouse for 2.6 million. He wants it for 3, and I'll take the 3. See, type of thing. But other than that, the way they did it was fine, and we made a slight adjustment to that 5 years ago to put the group together instead of piece here, piece there, to get that betterment down. Thank you for your engineering exercise.
You're welcome.
We have a robust collection, and I intend to use that terminology.
Mhm.
I like that a lot.
What's that?
We have
We
a
have a
robust
robust collection.
collection system.
Yeah, so,
And we
All right.
already received the bill on this?
I hope so.
As a wise man once told me, it's no until you ask. You heard our superintendent say our commercial flow's down a little bit.
Yeah.
Check's gonna be late.
Well, wait.
Well, can we cut it down a little bit? I'm kidding.
Commercial flow collection
No.
is not robust.
That was the opposite of robust.
no, no worrying about that. We never got his bill.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We want to abate it.
Wait. What did we just vote for a little while ago? You can't abate those things.
You're a good
Until
sport,
it's
Dan.
100% complete,
We're gonna fix those numbers.
you are still our partner and exposed to our harassment.
That's fine.
Good.
You're a good
I
sport.
enjoy it.
You're a good sport.
Again, Dan, thank you. That was a very
A lot
good
of work.
report. Now, it gives us a basis. If anybody wants to question, they can well come in. You have the same numbers that I have, and you can talk to them, and you can say, well, look, this is what it would cost. This is a best guess from people who know what they're doing,
Yep.
with an asterisk.
I'll
And
wait
the
for
asterisk says, we're not sure.
I'll wait for the revised numbers.
Okay.
Good job.
Thanks for
All right.
taking the time.
You bet.
Any emergency business?
None.
Any commission report?
Nope.
My report is, it's nice to see people again. Public forum, there being none. Press time, none. Okay, I will ask for adjournment for the purpose of performing administrative duties and no other action.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bickle, second by Mr. Kelleher. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 7:55. Thank you very much.